Welcome back today to our final segment on understanding and perceiving disabilities. What we're going to do in this final segment is introduce an idea that, at least for most people, and I would say myself included, until say 10 years ago or so when I started really looking at disability studies, thinking of it as a model was a new concept. And that's the idea of, it's the social model, that really disability is a normal aspect of life. That the disability isn't the problem. It's the environment, it's the attitudes, but that, a disability is no more of a problem than any differentness, if you would, that an individual might have. It's more how we as society and the negative attitudes we often present create barriers. People with disabilities really do experience a number of barriers and do have some similarities to other oppressed groups. I mean, sometimes the social model has also been referred to as the minority model. The idea being that if you're a person with a disability, you may very well have had experience with prejudice and discrimination. You very well may have had unequal treatment because, for example, you might not have been able to get into some place, or people might have treated you in a method that doesn't make you feel included. And we also know, similar to other groups that are oppressed, that you have higher unemployment, fewer job prospects, fewer opportunities for education. So the idea that people with disabilities are a minority group, if you will, is a new and kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. But if you think about it that way, then a lot of the solutions and a lot of approaches we might do make some sense. Historically, I will mention very quickly that when we think about civil rights, and this is where this model relies, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, while it included a lot of groups, said nothing about people with disabilities. It wasn't until, from a public standpoint, 1990 and the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that we as a country even became really aware that people with disabilities have experienced discrimination and do need an opportunity to be included, and laws should be changed to facilitate that. Because that's really what we're talking about when we say, what are disability rights? Disability rights are access. They're civil rights. They're the ability to, whether you're in a chair or whether you're not in a chair, to go to a movie, to go to a restaurant, to go to a school. Same thing for children. These laws exist as rights because why should anyone be excluded simply because of a disability? So as a society, we have an obligation that's also encouraged by law that says, yes, include everyone regardless of disability. One of the things we also want to consider as we think of the social model is the idea of solutions. How might we make society better? Because again, within this model, we're talking societal change, oftentimes systems change, not just saying that this is an individual's problem. So certainly one of the ideas, and we'll hit this a number of times as we go out throughout the semester, or throughout the course, I should say, is the idea of universal design. And that's where we take the idea of access, whether it's technology, whether it's architectural, whatever it might be, and think about at the onset, how can I make this as accessible as possible? So, wider doorways, curb cuts, reading levels that greater numbers of people can access. Those are all ideas that relate to universal design. So now, if I have talked about the issues of education and awareness, I'd also like to share a couple of our guest speakers talking about their experience within education and the importance of making sure that people within that environment are informed and aware.
Let's take a look at it from the social model and say, would you speak to a person of a different ethnicity and say, oh, this is the way that you're going to handle things? You go up to a black man and say, now this is the way that you should do it. Would I as a white man do that? No way, I would not. So why would a sighted person go to a blind person and do that? They don't live the experience. They can learn, and I could take a Black Studies course here at NIU and learn a lot of things, but I am not going to pretend to be someone who has a right to say, now this is what you need to do. It can say, here's some, let's talk about it and discuss things, but I'm not going to push. And a lot of times blind people and also I can say that, we're talking about speech, I can call myself blind, other people blind, that's part of the in-crowd thing. But blind people are often pushed and cajoled and coerced by the sighted because the sighted feel they know better. They know more. They would have to know more because their visual access to the world grants them that. But it's not the case.
And one way we can do that is to also allow that person and encourage that person with the disability fight for leadership, fight to be a leader, not how we would say a token, but fight to be a leader. Because in my personal opinion, is that you have quite a few people who know what's best for those people. I've heard that before, and I'm sure you've heard that before in different contexts. But there's always somebody who think they know what's best for you when you're an expert on yourself. Encourage students to push for leadership positions. Don't push to be part just to say we have one of those, but push for leadership to show your skills, polish your skills, stay up on your skills. Don't just, this is something that you did, like you hear some people say, I played football back in high school. I was a QB, whatever. And here they are 30 and 40 years old still talking about that. You don't want to say what you did when you were first disabled or whatever. Go on those accolades. You want to keep improving, to do more and more, to improve your ability to be a leader.
I do things differently. I may react differently to different things. Movie theaters, for example, I'm not real comfortable in. I'm getting better, but I don't like sitting in the dark. So I've learned to go when it's less crowded. But my way of doing something is just different than your way of doing something. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just different. And I don't see myself as being disabled or having a disability just as being me.
So as we move forward and think about next week, I'd like to first summarize our lesson from today on defining disability and perspectives on disability. As we've looked at it, some of the things we've mentioned in particular have to do with the nature of, is a disability visible or invisible, and the attitudes and beliefs that go along with that. We've talked about how disability is, there's a legal definition that says it's a condition that limits functioning, and that's significant, but it's also, disability is what we make it. Do we think of it as a moral issue? Do we think about it as a medical issue? Do we think about it as an issue of, this is a societal responsibility? How do we consider it? So as an overall perspective from this lesson, I would like you to take the idea that none of the models are necessarily fully right or fully wrong, but certainly if we're trying to respect and demonstrate a way of working collaboratively, the social model gives us a lot more hope for the future. Next week, we'll focus more on the topic of language, media, and the arts. A lot of things we'll say will reinforce some of the things we talked about today because language has a huge impact on attitudes. Until then, I'll see you.